All right, we'll start with our regular opening prayer before I hand it over to Brother Dhruva. Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the suffering and joyous beings everywhere. And with that, I will ask our beloved brother Dhruva to speak to us about chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita. Dhruva.
Namaste, everyone.
Namaste.
I'd like to say, I'm going to talk a little bit about this pandemic and about mitigation and new normal. We could be kind of proud, everyone from India, that the Namaste, which we have been doing for thousands of years, has now become the new normal and keeping hands off other people. But as we go through chapter 12, I'll try to point out some instances of this. Now, before I go any further, I would like to chant a couple of shlokas that usually are chanted before the study of the Gita. 3 of them are my favorite. There's a total of 9 of them. The first one is in praise of Krishna. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Vande Krishnam Jagadguru. We salute Sri Krishna, the Guru of the universe, the son of Vasudeva, who came to earth to destroy evil and who was supreme bliss to his mother Devaki. Now this next verse is dedicated to all of you who are called Sudhi. Sudhir are people who have refined and wise intelligence. Sarvo Panishado Gavo Dogta Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsas Sudhir Bhokta Dugtam Gitamritam Mahata. If all the Upanishads are like cows, then Krishna is the milkman, and Arjuna is the calf, and all of you people who are Sudhi get to enjoy the immortal nectar of the Bhagavad Gita. The third verse pertains to me. Om Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langoyate Girim Yat Kripa Tadaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. I salute the supremely blissful Madhava. By his grace, a mute person becomes eloquent and a crippled person is enabled to leap over a mountain. So now, all my friends there, before we go to chapter 12, there's been something that's been bothering me about the Bhagavad Gita for the past 50 years. Maybe you've given it a thought too. And that is, at the end of the first chapter is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the yoga of the Arjuna's despondency. Now, before I go into that, we need to look back and try to figure out the Gita is at least 2,500 to 3,000 years old. At some point, somebody organized it into these 18 chapters, and it may have been a later person who decided to give a name to each chapter. Are we okay here with
I don't know.
Yeah, okay, all right. So these 18 chapters of the Gita, we're not sure if if who arranged them. Obviously, the devotees will say this came exactly like this from Sri Krishna's mouth. But we know that various people probably worked on it at various times. And each chapter was called a yoga. At the end of each chapter, you'll notice the second chapter is Sankhya Yoga, the third chapter is Karma Yoga, the fourth chapter is Jnana Yoga. It goes on and on like that. But what bothered me was that Vishada, despondency, is not a yoga. So how could we go calling it Arjuna Vishada Yoga? And I looked back, I've been studying a commentary by Madhusudana Saraswati that's about 500 years old, and he has accepted that at the end, Arjuna Vishada Yoga. And you go back to Shankara to about 800, he has accepted it. And after reading the Gita a number of times, I generally would skip that chapter because I didn't want to read about all the warriors. And then I would go right to chapter 2 and what you might consider the meat of the Gita. But I think I have discovered something thanks to this pandemic. Now, the grounds that we have for Arjuna in chapter 1, they say he is Vishidan. He is sitting down with despondence. That is only mentioned one time. But as I looked at the second half of the Gita, the last 20 verses of the first chapter, those of you who are familiar a little bit with Sanskrit, I found that Arjuna used the verb to see. Now remember, darshana, to see, is in Hinduism is the term for philosophical system. It's a darshana. So Arjuna says in verse 20, drishtva, having seen his opponents. Verse 22, nirikshe, I'm examining them. He says avekshe in 23. He says tatra pashat, he saw. Tan samiksha, examining them carefully. Drishtwemam swajanam. Then he sees evil omens. Nimittani cha pashami. He doesn't see any good. Anupashami. And so what we have here, the one activity Arjuna is doing, is mentioned kripa, compassion, and but this despondency is only mentioned one time. So I finally found the key to this, and that is in the 13th chapter, the kshetra, the field, and the knower of the field. Well, Sri Krishna tells us who the knower, who the field and the knower of the field, and then before he gets on talking about what should be known, he talks about jnana. What is knowledge? And verse 7 to 11, he lists 20 forms of knowledge. And the verse 8, here he says these four things: janma mrityu, birth and death, jara vyadi, old age and disease, dukkha dosha darshana, to see the defect of suffering in these things. So what Sri Krishna is saying is seeing dukkha and its defective nature is actually a source of knowledge. And so to me, I would actually change at the end of chapter 1, instead of calling out Arjuna's yoga of despondency, I would call it dukkha darshanam or dukkha anudarshanam or dukkha doshanudarshanam. Now, since we're on the topic, we could very quickly, I'd like to take an overview of this subject of suffering, because it's quite prevalent. First of all, Sri Krishna says, he calls this world duk alayam, an abode of suffering. And another place he says, anityam asukam lokam, coming to this ephemeral and unhappy world, worship me. Instead of saying dukam, he says asukam, not happy. And a little bit later in the second chapter, again, Krishna talks about dukkha, and this time he sort of, he makes a play on words. And he takes the word yoga, and we could call that the junction. Viyoga is the disjunction, and sam yoga is the conjunction. So Krishna says, dukkha sam yoga viyoga yoga sam nitam. He said yoga should be known as the The junction should be known as the disjunction of the junction of the. You see, it's even got me confused right now. Some yoga, some nitam. At any rate, so I would like to say then that looking at the first chapter, looking at how Arjuna is examining everything and seeing all this suffering, that was a form of wisdom. Now, we could turn to contemporary, the Buddha. You all know that his whole system is based on dukkha. Dukkha, there's a cause of dukkha, which is desire. Then there's a escape from suffering, nirvana, and then there's the means to that, which is the dharma, doing everything right. Then we could turn at the same time to Patanjali, and in his Yoga Sutras, he also had some sutras about yoga, about dukkha, and these sutras were just 3 words. They make them very brief so you can remember them. And what he had to say is 2 of them say sarvam, everything is suffering. He said sarvam para vasham dukam, under the control of other people. Para, others, vasham, control, dukam. We look in our lives, we can see many instances where we are under the control of other people. Then here's an amazing one that you might find hard to believe. This second sutra is sarvam dukam, everything is suffering, vivekinaha, to the wise. Now you may say wisdom should take you beyond suffering, but there was actually an explanation. The commentator Vyasa said, suppose you're walking through the forest and you brush it into cobwebs, you won't even feel them. However, if a cobweb happens to brush your naked eyeball, you might feel a lacerating pain. And so Patanjali compares the sensitive souls to the people that brush their eyes with the cobweb. The other 2 verses on dukkha are, he says, dukkha badane, if you are afflicted by a certain type of suffering or pain, what you need to do is pratipaksha bhavanam. You need to think of the opposite. The pakshi is a bird because he has 2 wings, paksha. And so the thought is if one of the wings is down, you have to press the other one to bring it back up and restore equanimity and a sense of balance. And then the last one is heyam dukkam anagatam. The only suffering that can actually be avoided, heyam, is anagatam, that which has not yet arrived, namely future pain can be avoided. So that's Patanjali and his Ashtanga Yoga. He had those various thoughts on yoga. We've heard what Krishna had to say about it, and the last school of thought we'll talk about is the Vedanta, where they talk about the tritapa, the triple affliction, or the tapa trayam. And first is adhyatma. Adi means pertaining to. Adhyatma means pertaining to the individual. Like if we were born crippled or blind, that's unique to just us, ourselves. This would also include all kinds of mental suffering as well. The next one's called adibhuta or adibhotika. And that doesn't mean the 5 elements. It means other creatures, bhutas, like lions and tigers and people. And in fact, under this heading of the adibhotika, we would have to include this current pandemic. This is something that is transferred from one being, bhuta, to another being. So just to put things in perspective. And the final category is adidoivika. And doiva is considered the will of God or fate. And that would be like the Moses flood or a hurricane or volcanoes or asteroids hitting the earth, like that. So I don't want to leave everybody with a taste of dukkha in their mouths. So I wanted to say one final thing. We could add a 5th sutra, and this is by the Holy Mother herself, where she takes all this 4,000 or 5,000 years of suffering and she completely upends it. And she uses these Sanskrit words, but she says them in Bengali. She says dukkha Bhagavaner doyar dan. Suffering is the Lord, Bhagavaner, doya dan. Dan is a present of compassion. So all of our suffering, if we only knew the truth and what we were going through and why and how, then we would realize that this is the gift of compassion. And I might also say, if you might think that your own swakarma is involved, Nisargadatta also said that your karma is nothing else but the healing hand of God. All right, that's a little introduction I wanted to make. I wish there was somewhere we could go and put in an appeal that Arjuna would not have to be associated with despondency. He was a great hero. He fought the battle. He did everything right, and it's thanks to him that we are here. And he definitely displayed the knowledge of dukkha doshanu darshana. He carefully inspected suffering and then went on to overcome it. All right, now we can switch to chapter 12, Bhakti Yoga. Let's see how long. Okay. Chapter 12, Bhakti Yoga, is the shortest chapter. It's only 20 verses. And Arjuna, he starts out in the middle of a sentence. He says the word evam, meaning thus. Obviously, he's referring back to something which had just happened. So to complete the vision of Bhakti Yoga that is presented to us in chapter 12, we really need to back up 5 verses to chapter 11, where Arjuna has had this awe-inspiring Vishwarupa Darshana, where he and all the beings were being swallowed up by Krishna and everyone was terrified. And so Arjuna begged Krishna, prayed to him to come back to his normal human form. And so this is where I would like to start. When Krishna assumed his normal form, Arjuna says this beautiful verse, 51, chapter 11. He says, Drishtvaimam manusham rupam tava somyam janardana idanimasmi samvrita sacheta prakritim gataha. He says, seeing this human form, and it's not just a human form, it's somyam, manusham somyam rupam. He says, I am transformed, samvrita, I am enlightened, sateja, and prakritim gataha, I've been restored to my normal nature. Now that can mean 2 things. Arjuna was restored to his warrior self, so he's able to battle. It also means that he could have been restored to his spiritual nature, so that he would be able to fight in a normal way. So then the Lord says, it's very difficult for anyone to see this divine form that I have shown you. He said, you cannot, not by the study of the Vedas, not by austerity, not by charity, and not by any sacrifice can I be seen in the way you have been seen. Well, the question then comes, how can the Lord be seen? And he says, bhaktya, by means of ananyaya bhakti, unswerving devotion, aham evam vidorjuna, natum, you can know me, drashtum chatattvena, you can truly see me, and finally, praveshtum chaparantapa. So the result there of that unswerving bhakti is not just seeing the Lord, but knowing him and entering into him. And this is a good point to just step aside a second and look at the overall scheme of bhakti. In the Vaishnava tradition, they say that bhakti has 9 phases. You've all heard of these, the Shravana, hearing, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, remembering, Pada Sevanam, puja, and Vandanam, salutation, and bandhu, tvam, being friendly with the Lord, and finally, atma nivedanam, surrendering oneself. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, this bhakti, this 9 phases of bhakti, you need to bake them in the oven. It's kind of like an apple pie. It has 9 ingredients of cinnamon and nutmeg and sugar and flour and apples. But he said, bhakti pakle, if you bake your bhakti, what happens is bhavha, you have bhava, and that's the higher form of bhakti. And that's what they've said in this verse. Bhaktya ananyaya, not swerving or going anywhere else. That unswerving bhakti is the same as bhava. And we're going to see that again in the 12th chapter. Now, the final verse of chapter 11 here, Madhusudana Saraswati, in his commentary, he says that of the entire Gita, this is the essence of the entire Gita. Ending of chapter 11. It's mat karma krit, mat paramo, mat bhakta sangha varjitaha, nirvoida sarva bhuteshu yasamamiti pandava. These are just the simple, ordinary things that we can do, but they form the basis of bhakti. Mat karma krit, do your work for me. Mat paramo, have me as the supreme goal of your life. Mat bhakta sangha varjita, just do not be attached to anything. Nirdvoida sarva bhuteshu, don't feel any enmity towards other beings. Whoever is like that, samameti pandava, that person comes to me. So in these 5 verses, we've been shown the higher type of bhakti and how that takes us towards the Lord. Now when we move to chapter 12, we're going to see how the Lord comes to us. So verse 1 and 2 are going to be Arjuna's question, and verse 2 is going to be Sri Krishna's answer. Arjuna has a slight, he's a little bit confused because he's heard too many things. So he says, Evam, thus, satata yuktaye, those people who are always engaged, bhaktas tvam paryupasate, those bhaktas who worship you, always engaged. That's line A and B, those first half of the verse. He refers to the bhaktas. And then he says, ye twaksharam anirdesham te sham ke yoga vit tamaha. He says, who knows yoga, yoga vit, and then tama at the end of a word means the best. Who knows yoga the best? The bhaktas, or on the other hand, those that worship the avyakta and the akshara. These are the 2 words that are used, unmanifest and akshara, imperishable. The idea for about the imperishable is that whatever has parts will eventually become perishable when the energy that brings it parts together is dissipated. So that's the phrase that's going to be used throughout. Avyaktam aksharam refers to the impersonal, formless form of the divine. And so that's Arjuna's question. Who knows yoga the best? Arjuna, by this question, he's actually giving away his bias a little bit, and Sri Krishna is going to, in the answer, he's going to change things around. And so he says, this is verse 2 now. Maya veshamano yimam nitya yukta upasate shraddaya parayopetas time yukta tamamata. Those who fix their mind in me and who are always engaged in my worship, they are yukta tama. They should be considered to be the best practitioners of yoga. Now notice, Arjuna, he didn't say who was yukta tama. He asked who is yoga vit tamaha. In his mind, knowledge was the premium thing. But Sri Krishna didn't say who was yoga vit tamaha, who knew yoga the best. Instead, he changed it to say yukta tama. He is the best person who practices yoga. And this, in fact, reminds us a little bit back in the 2nd chapter of the Stita Prajna, when Arjuna asked, how does the Stita Prajna walk, how does he talk, and how does he sit? Well, when he asks the question of Sri Krishna, how does he talk? He's actually giving away, not, I won't say his ignorance, but his preconception. And Krishna, his answer, I don't know how many can remember how the Stita Prajna talks, but the answer was Stita Dir Munir Uchate. The Stita D is actually a Muni. He doesn't talk, Arjuna. So now, so that's the question and the answer, verse 1 and 2. Now, 3, 4, and 5, these next three verses deal with the person, the Gnani. Don't forget, the Gnani is also a Bhakta. And earlier, Sri Krishna has said that 4 types of people worship me: the afflicted, the philosophical type of people, the people who want something, and the Gnani. So the Gnani is also considered to be one of the Bhaktas. But here, the troubles facing the person following the path of knowledge are being shown in these 3 verses. Sri Krishna says, Ye tvaksharam anidesham avyaktam paryupasate sarvaktargam achintyam cha kutastam achalam dhruvam. That's half a sentence. The verb will come in verse 4. But he says, now in this verse 3, he's going to list 7 attributes of the unmanifest. He says, Ye tvaksharam. The second thing is anirdesham. Anirdesham means how you can describe something, but this is indescribable. Anirdesham. Paryupasate. These gnanis who worship this being. Then in line C, he says, Sarvatragam achintyam cha. Now, we all know Sarvatragam means it goes everywhere, but there's a huge paradox here. It is also achintyam. It can never be an object of thought. Well, if you think something, and that thinking has to happen somewhere, and if this thing is Sarvatragam, how can it not also perceive those thoughts? So it's like, this is just a huge dilemma that is really hard to understand and even harder to overcome. And then, so, Sarvatragam achintyam cha, and in line D, Kutastam achalam dhruvam. These are 3 more attributes. Kutastam, this has 2 meanings. The one I learned a long time ago was kuta is a ledge or a peak. And a person sitting on the top of that ledge looks down, and he's considered to be kutasta. And this refers to the practice of the gnani to consider himself the seer, and everything far away is the seen. Only recently I was reading a commentary, and this Madhusudana Saraswati said that the kuta actually means mitya, false. And he said, so for an example would be kuta sakshi, a false witness. So that's another. If you took that meaning of kuta, it would mean that Brahman is hidden in the realm of Maya. So that's kutastam achalam. Achalam is the name of a mountain, something that does not move. And finally, Dhruvam is the pole star that is constant. So those are 7 descriptions of the imperishable unmanifest, featuring the great paradox of it goes everywhere, it's all pervading, but it can never be an object of thought. Now, verse 4, here are 3 more problems for the people following the path of Jnana Yoga. He says, Samniyam indriya gramam sarvatra samabuddhaya te prapnuvanti mameva sarvabhutahite rataha. All right. Samniyamya, completely controlling, indriya gramam. We all know the indriyas are the sense organs, but here Sri Krishna calls them a whole indriya grama. A grama is a village. And it's actually true that our sense perceptions, even though there are 5 sense organs, we're perceiving thousands and thousands of things per day, hearing and seeing, etc. So he says, controlling the village of your sense organs. But it occurred to me when you take the context here that these 3 verses are referring to the Gnanis, it's the people who follow that path that have to control their senses. And it means the bhaktas do not have to control their senses. And of course, that's going to shock everybody. And you're going to, but before you accuse me of heresy, I would like to, my source here is Sri Ramakrishna himself. What he said to certain devotees, he said, you don't have to control the sense organs. He says, you control what he called ek indriya, the one sense organ, ek indriya. Now, some people might take that to be the sense of taste, rasa. They talk about that in the second chapter of Stita Prajna, that they say, rase jite, jitam sarvam. If you can control the sense of taste, then you've controlled everything. But actually, even though this was true, Sri Ramakrishna didn't really mean that. He meant by ek indriya, the single organ, he meant the antar indriya, the inner organ, and that was the heart. And he said, all your senses, they flow out. They're like needles of a magnet, but they're coated with mud, so they just go out to the objects of the world. But he said, if you can purify the needle of your mind by washing your mind clean with tears of repentance, then you will be attracted to the inner, the big magnet in the heart. So that's verse 4, good news for the bhaktas. He doesn't have to control the village of sense perceptions. Next thing, line B, is sarvatra samabuddhaya. The bhakta, he has to be same-sided everywhere. And once again, I would interpret this to be that the gnani has to be same-sided and the bhakta does not have to be same-sided. And here I would just quote from, in the Bhagavad Purana, they describe who is the lowest form of a bhakta, who is more advanced, and who is the supreme bhakta. And I won't mention the top and the bottoms, but the one in the middle, a more advanced bhakta has to follow this practice. And the advice is given. You see 4 types of beings in the universe: Ishvara, the Lord; second, tad adineshu, those that are subject to the Lord, the bhaktas; the third one is bali sheshu, those that is ignorant or foolish people; and the fourth one is dvishatsu, hateful people. Now, what happens when a bhakta runs into those 4 types of being? He has prema for Ishvara, he has moitri, friendship for the bhaktas, he has kripa for people who are still in ignorance, and finally for the wicked, he practices upeksha. Upeksha means to avoid, go around them. And so that is not the same as being same-sided. This is seeing differentiation, but this is just one more thing that the followers of the path of knowledge have to practice, is that same-sidedness. So the Lord says, Te prapnuvanti mam eva. They indeed do attain me, but he says, oh yes, one more thing. Sarvabhuta hite rata. They have to practice compassion to all beings. Now, we all know at Christmas time we buy a whole bundle of presents for our family, but we don't care about all the poor kids in the rest of the world. So we know that our compassion only goes so far, but the jnanis have to practice compassion for all. And here's how the commentator, Madhusudana Saraswati, defines this practicing compassion. He says, Aboyam sarvabhutebhyo, to all beings, I am giving a promise of fearlessness, swaha. And then he says, krita sannyasa, and then he takes the vow of sannyasa. Well, that might be very good for those few people who take the vow of sannyasa, but compassion really means doing something. It helps someone. Word for help is upakara. That means upa, going close to someone, and kara, doing something for them. So that's verse 4, and that tells us the much greater difficulty of the follower of the path of knowledge. Now, in the 5th verse, he ends this topic. He says, Klesha means difficulty. Klesho dikataras te sham is greater for those who avyakta sakta chetasam, those whose minds are fixed on the avyakta. And then he says, avyakta hi gatir dukam, the goal of the unmanifest. Here the word dukam means difficulty. Dehavadbir avapyate, it is with great difficulty attained by embodied beings. So that's verse 3, 4, and 5, and that tells about the followers of the path of knowledge, at least 4 ways that path is more difficult. And that is why it is said, on the one hand, you have nirvinna, people who are tired of the world and are ready to give it up. And on the other hand, you have opposite pole, the ati sakta, extremely attached. And then it says, for the rest of the people, bhakti yogasya siddhida, it grants perfection. And that is why bhakti is praised so much, because Sri Krishna in another place said, susukam kartum, it's very easy to perform. Now, verse 6 and 7, they hang together, and this I like to call it the Krishna Contract. And so verse 6, Krishna is telling Arjuna, he's suggesting 4 things that Arjuna might want to do, or he can choose from. He doesn't have to do all 4, but if he could try to do one of them. And so here they are. Ye tu sarvani karmani moi sanyasya matparaha ananyena eva yogena mam dhyayanta upasate. Ye tu sarvani karmani moi sanyasya, whoever surrenders all of their actions to me, well, that is karma yoga. And the next 2 words are matparaha, and who have me for the highest goal of their life, that is bhakti yoga. Now line C, they say ananyena eva yogena, those who practice the yoga of non-differentiation, that refers to the path of jnana yoga. And finally line D, mam dhyayanta. Dhyayanta is nothing other than dhyana or meditation, that's raja yoga. So here we have thousands of years ago, Sri Krishna was telling us about how these 4 paths of yoga, he says, if you follow any of them, then verse 7, here is his promise. He says, Tesham means for all of them, aham, I, Krishna. Now he invents a word, and this word is samudarta. This is kind of like Jesus. We refer to him as the Redeemer or the Savior. Sri Krishna invents this word, samudarta. Darta means he grabs a hold of you, and he lifts you up. Uddarta. Sam means totally or perfectly. Now, where are we that he needs to come grab us and lift us up? He tells us. He says, Sagarat, from the ocean. What ocean? Samsara Sagarat, the ocean of this relative being. And what's the nature of this samsara? Mrityu samsara sagarat, this ocean of samsara which always ends in death. Line C, he says, bhavami, I become that uplifter. When? Na chirat partha. He calls Arjuna partha. Well, I'll get back to that in a minute, but he says na chirat. Chirat means a long time. Na chirat, very soon. Maya veshita chetasam. Now, when I heard that nut chirat, not long before we were saved, it reminded me of Martin Luther King. You heard many of his sermons, and they got a name, like the I Have a Dream, or the Mountaintop. One of them was called Not Long. It was one of his last sermons, and he would say, how long must justice be denied? And all the congregation would shout out, not long, not long. And here Sri Krishna is saying, nat chirat partha, not long. Before I become the uplifter. So that really is Krishna's contract. If you want to sign up, you can sign up for karma yoga, or you can sign up for bhakti yoga. Just write matparaha, or jnana yoga, or raja yoga. And then the Lord promises he'll do his part and come and get us at the critical moment. Now, he calls Arjuna Partha, and that has a special meaning. It means Arjuna doesn't even have to sign the contract like the rest of us, because his mother, Prita, was the sister of Krishna's father, and that makes Arjuna the cousin to Sri Krishna. So, of course, Sri Krishna is going to save him. He doesn't, they did this just for us, to give us the chance to sign this contract. And we could actually stop chapter 12 right there if we wanted, with this great contract with Sri Krishna. Now, the next 5 verses, they form a I like to call this the Krishna Olympics, verse 8 through 12. When I was in high school, I used to compete in athletics. And when I would high jump, if you cleared the bar at 5'10", they raise it higher, 6 feet. They raise it higher. Every time you go higher until you finally lose. Sri Krishna is doing it just the opposite. He's going to give us the hardest thing first, and then he's going to make it easier and easier and easier until everyone succeeds. And then after we look at these 3 or 4 things, we're going to see also what the rewards are. So he says, now verse 8, it's going to refer back to Patanjali's Yoga Shastra again. And you'll all remember that the steps 6, 7, and 8 in yoga are the dharana, dhyana, and the samadhi, fixing your mind on the Lord, meditating, and then having samadhi. That's called the antaranga, the esoteric part of yoga. And when you do those 3 together, that's called making an effort, or a samyama. So this is what he says. Maeva mana adatswa, mai buddhim niveshaya, nivasishyasi maeva, ata urdvam nasamshaya. Maeva mana adatswa, fix your mind on me. Mai buddhim niveshaya, let your intellect penetrate me. Nivasishyasi maeva, you shall live in me alone. Well, that sounds to me very much like samadhi. Ata urdvam nasamshaya. From this moment forward, have no doubt about it. That's showing the great confidence Krishna has in us, that he starts out with the very first thing, because he believes we can attain it, is he wants us to practice meditation, and he holds out the promise that we will attain samadhi. So now we go to the 9th verse. Suppose for some reason we can't do this, he gives us an option. He says, Ata chittam samadatum nashaknoshi mayi stiram. If you cannot fix your mind on me steadily, what to do? Abhyasa yogena tato mamichaptum dhananjaya. Well, then if you can't fix your mind on me, practice Abhyasa Yoga. And by Abhyasa Yoga, Sri Ramakrishna shed a little bit of light on that. One of his English words was circus. And when he mentioned the word circus, he referred to the English woman that was called a bibi, who used to ride bareback on a horse. And the horse would go on around in a circle in the circus, and the woman would jump through the ring. And so Sri Ramakrishna said, just look at how difficult that is to learn how to ride and get up and stand up and then on one foot and then jumping through. And that is his colorful way of saying what it's like to constantly keep on practicing. So now in the next verse, the 10th verse, if we can't even practice abhyasa, then they say, Abhyase asamartosi, if you are not capable of practicing practice, matkarma paramo bhava, then do some work for me. Madartamapi karmani kurvan siddhim avapsyasi. If you do your work for me, you will attain perfection. So see, even though you've come down several notches, he's still handing out gold medals for third and fourth place in the Krishna Olympics. Atoetadapya shaktosi kartum madyogamashvitaha sarva karma falatyaga tata kuru yatatmavan. If you can't even do your work for Krishna, then at the very least, give up the fruits of all your activity. So now he winds it up by comparing these four things. In verse 12, he says, Shreyo hi gnanam abhyasa. Knowledge is superior to practice. Gnanat, compared to knowledge, dhyanam vishishyate. Meditation excels. Dhyanat, even better than meditation, karma phala tyaga is the renunciation of the fruit of all your action. And then he concludes, he says, tyagat, the minute you let go, shantir anantaram. The minute you let go, you find peace. And the example that they give is there's a small bird that catches a fish in its mouth, and then a bunch of hawks will attack that small bird. And the minute the bird lets go of the fish, at that moment the hawks will be gone. And so that is what Sri Krishna said, Tyagat Shantir Anantaram. Immediately, without any delay. Antaram is a delay. If we deposit money in the bank and we say, now can we write a check? They say, no, sorry, you cannot withdraw a check until next Tuesday or Wednesday. That gap is an antaram, a delay. But here, Sri Krishna says, anantaram, there is absolutely no delay. You will attain peace the minute you let go. All right, that concludes that portion, verses 8 through 12. And we have 7 verses to go. And these 7 verses I would call going to heaven. Krishna, at the end of the Mahabharata, before he passed away, he spoke to his dear disciple Uddhava, and he told Uddhava, ask all the questions you have, and I shall answer them all. So Uddhava, what is jnana, what is karma, what is bhakti, what is work, what is this, that, what is renunciation? And one of his questions was, what is heaven? And Krishna's answer, heaven, he said, Swarga Sattvagunodayam. Sattva-guna, we all know what Sattva-guna is. Uddayam means rising up in our life. When that Sattva-guna rises in our life, then we create the heaven right here on earth. This is sort of the new normal that was supposed to happen. And so what we're going to see now, there between in verse 13 through 20, Sri Krishna lists 50 things, 51, I'm not quite sure, but there's about 50 sattvic qualities that we are encouraged to practice. And so we'll just take them one by one. And the first one was going to be a really tough one because I told you we'd be going down the rabbit hole. And the rabbit hole means when we jump off the subject a little bit and track it and see where we go and hope we don't get lost, that we can get out. And I was going to have to do that 3 times on verse 13, but luckily I decided to consider the dukkha before we talk today, so we won't have to go down that one. But at any rate, verse 13, and this is the start of the sattvic qualities. Advaishta sarvabhutanam moitra karuna evacha nirmamo nirahankara samadukha sukha kshami. All right. Advaishta sarvabhutanam, not hating any other beings. And then after that it came moitra, friendliness, and moitra karuna, and compassion. So you go from not hating, and as you improve, you then become friendly, moitra, and if you improve even more, you realize friendship is not enough. You have to help people, and you end up practicing compassion. Advaishta sarvabhutana moitra karuna evacha, and karuna is passion. Now, here's my personal story on this verse here. India is well known for their doctrine of ahimsa, and that they achieved independence from England following that practice. And we know that ahimsa, nonviolence, is called the paramo dharma, the supreme dharma. When I was 19 years old, I got a letter from Uncle Sam inviting me to join the army and go to Vietnam. Now, when that happens to a young man, there's only 4 things he can do. First is you can go fight. Second thing is you can be what's called a draft dodger, and there's several types of that. We had 6,000 young men go to Canada, and many of them still living there. That's one form. Another would be the person would act crazy when they went for their physical, and they would get disqualified for mental health. I had a friend that took a pistol and very carefully aimed it at his foot, and so it wouldn't hit a bone, and then he shot himself in the foot and went to his physical wearing a cast. And the fourth and the final position you could take is one that I took, and that's the most extreme. That's called non-cooperator. I turned my draft card into the state attorney on April 4th of 1968. And 4 days later, Martin Luther King was assassinated. Now, there were 4 of us that did this. Out of that group of 4, 2 ended up in Sandstone Federal Prison for 2 years for non-cooperating. But my friend Roland and I, who became involved with the Vedanta Society for some reason, I like to think Sri Ramakrishna saved us. We didn't have to go to jail. So what I wanted to say here is, remember at the end of the last chapter, we said, whoever is my bhakta, he comes to me. And how in this chapter, we're seeing how Sri Krishna comes to us. We already saw how he came to save us from the ocean. In this case, even though I never heard of yoga, I didn't know that nonviolence was the first step in yoga. The very fact that I took the first step meant that you may not like to think Sri Ramakrishna, I think Sri Ramakrishna, but it could be that the force of yoga, taking the right step, automatically leads you on. And so it was shortly thereafter that I came across Vedanta and Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. So I thought that was interesting that, this yoga really works, even the preliminary steps. Okay, we don't have to discuss dukkha. We have discussed it already, but line C in this verse is nirmamo nirahankara. Be free from mama, which is a sense of possessiveness, mine, and be free from nirmamo nirahankara, be free from ego. Well, this is, here's where we go down the second rabbit hole, or the third one, however you want to consider it. Sri Ramakrishna had, one of his great teachings was that nobody ever overcomes or escapes their ego. He said even avatars have an ego. So he went on to say that what has to be done is that the unripe ego has to be converted to the ripe ego. Now, he called it the unripe ego is the Kancha Ami, he called that, and the ripe ego is the Taka Ami. And we all know what the unripe ego is. Whenever we hurt other beings and hurt ourselves, that's the unripe ego. And whenever we help others and help ourselves, that's the ripe ego. Now, Sri Ramakrishna didn't just pass out advice. He actually practiced what he was preaching. And so he made, this is, I discovered this prayer when I was reading the gospel in Bengali. And in order to understand the cry and the prayer of Sri Ramakrishna, you only need to understand a couple of words. Ami in Bengali means I. Tumi in Bengali means you. And so Sri Ramakrishna would pray, and he would say, Tumi Guru, oh Lord, you are the Guru, Ami Shishya, and I am your disciple. That is the ripe ego. Not that I know everything, and everyone wants to be a guru, nobody wants to be a shishya. That was Sri Ramakrishna's first prayer, and he wasn't saying that just for us. He literally cried out and cried these prayers. Then he said, Tumi Prabhu, you are all powerful, you are the Lord. Tumi Prabhu, Ami Das, I am your servant, I am the servant. So the attitude of a servant is the ripe ego. Next he said, Tumi Purna, Now, Purna doesn't mean infinite. Infinite is anta, without end. Purna means full. Absolutely everything is full of, that Purnamada, Purnamidam, there we have that peace chant. Well, if the Lord is the full being, then what are we? Ami, Angsha. And Angsha is just a part of the full. And when it comes into practice, when we work, we should be an Angsha. We should learn how to be part of a larger group of people that we work with to avoid conflict. Another prayer that he made for the ripe ego is he said, "To me, Ma, you are my mother, Ami Santan, and I am your child." We don't have to even practice all of these prayers. One prayer might be enough. For me, it might be, I just want to say that prayer alone. To me, Ma, Ami Santan, and remember that. Now, there's another relationship, and that is to me, Krishna. By Krishna, we have another word, akarsha, means attraction. Whatever is beautiful and lovable, that's what's known as Krishna. And Ami Radha, I am Radha. That doesn't mean I'm Krishna's girlfriend. From Radha, we get Aradhana, which means worship. And that's what Radha stands for. She is the one who worships the Lord. And next we have, for the Vedanti, for the Gnana Yogi, we have to me, Ami, you are me, and Ami to me, and I am you. And finally, the last one of all, it's to me, and by the way, on this one, Sri Ramakrishna said that if there's one thing to know, and if you know this, you won't need anything else, and that is, to me, Jantri, you are, and Ami Jantra, I am the yantra, I am just the tool, the instrument, and you are the operator of the instrument. And Sri Ramakrishna said, if you can actually truly know that, understand it, and practice that, you will become a Jivan Mukta. All right, all of that's down the rabbit hole of unripe ego coming out with the ripe ego. So we landed in the right spot. And now we move to the 14th verse. And some of these verses are so poetic, you could just memorize them. Santushta satatam yogi. A yogi, satatam, always is santushta, completely satisfied. We don't really have to explain that too much. Santushta satatam yogi. Line B, yata atma, he strives. Here atma means the lower self. You engage yourself in activity. Drira nishchayaha. Drira means firm, nishchaya means resolve. That means if the guru tells you to dig in one spot, you keep digging in that spot until you reach the water. You don't give up and go somewhere else. Mayarpitamano buddhir yomad bhakta same priyaha. All right, 15th verse. This is this practice, I think, was Holy Mother appreciated the most in her children, in her bhaktas. If there was one thing she wanted to see, that would be this. And so verse 15, Yasmat, by whom, nodvijate loko. Loka means the world, and loka also means people. By whom nobody is ever disturbed. Yasmat nodvijate loko, and then flip it around backwards. Lokat, by the world, nodvijate chayaha, that nor is he disturbed by the world. Harshamar shabayod vegor mukta ya sachame priyaha. Harsha is too much, gets overly excited, is not considered to be a good thing. Amarsha means, I had a hard time figuring out what this meant in the English word for this, but if you can't bear somebody who has something and you wish you had it, it's not exactly envy. It's called amarsha. And I don't know, it took me many weeks before someone finally told me the right word for that. And it's not envy, because if I had won the lotto, I wouldn't envy you. But amarsha means I can't bear that you have something. And the word I finally found is begrudge. You begrudge people of something. That is not something that a bhakta should do. Now the next verse, 16. Anapeksha shuchir daksha. That's line name. These three things. Let's take the first, anapeksha. That comes from, we said how in the first chapter, Arjuna 10 times was seeing things. The root for that seeing was iksha. And here we have that again, that word iksha. And to see, apa iksha means we're seeing all around us. Everywhere we look, we're looking at this person and saying, can you help me? Can you help me? Can you help me? That's apeksha, which means expectation. We go around looking for the world and people to help us. Unapeksha means freedom from expectation. Very, just another quality. Unapeksha, shuchi. We can't even, purity. I think of Holy Mother, and that's not a topic that really we can discuss. Unapeksha, shuchi. Daksha. Daksha means skilled. Probably because your right hand is daksha, and most people are right-handed, and so they're more adept at right-handed. Anapeksha shuchi daksha. Udasina gatavyataha. Udasina is very close to anapeksha that we just said, which is freedom from expectation. Udasina means he's asina, sitting, and ut, he's looking up. He's indifferent. That's the type of person. They have sadhus in the north of India who are called udasis. They would, practicing udasina means you would never take sides in an argument. And I remember long ago I read about Swami Vivekananda was walking somewhere in California, and somebody looked at him, and he noticed that Swami Vivekananda seemed to have his gaze upwards, and he called Swami Vivekananda, he called him Sky Pilot. So that's a word, udasina gatavyataha, free from disturbances. Sarvaramba parityagi, completely giving up all undertakings. Yomad bhakta same priyaha, whoever is my bhakta, yomad bhakta same priyaha, that person is dear to me. Sri Krishna uses that phrase at least exactly six times. In these last 7 verses, he uses that. Whoever is my devotee, that person is dear to me. All right. Verse 17 is going to be an example of what I like to call the geometry of the Gita. Sri Krishna lists four things that a bhakta should not do. Yona hrishyati, he who does not get overly excited. Nadveshti, does not hate. Let's remember that, nadveshti. Third, nashochati, does not grieve. And the fourth is nakankshati. Okay, so of those 4 things, I want you to remember, does not hate and does not long. Nadveshti, nakankshati. And here's the geometry of the Gita. In another chapter somewhere, Krishna says, that person should be known as a nitya sannyasi, an eternal renouncer. And who is that person? And that is neyasa yonadveshti nakankshati. Neyasa nitya sannyasi. He should be known as a nitya sannyasi. Yonadveshti nakankshati, who does not hate and does not long. So and here Shri Krishna just said the very same thing. So we can extrapolate from this to say that a bhakta, according to Shri Krishna, is also a nitya sannyasi, an eternal sannyasi, if he practices these 4 things. Does not get overly excited, does not hate, does not grieve, and does not long for things. Now, here's a difficult part. This is line C. There's four parts to each verse. And then that is called Shubha Shubha Parityagi. He gives up good and bad. And this is another one where I like to call going down the rabbit hole. 17, part C. Shubha Shubha Parityagi. Shubha is good Ashubha is bad. That's easy. Now here's the Parityagi. Let's look at that word. Sri Ramakrishna said if we say the word Gita 10 times, we get tagi. Tagi means renounce, renounce, renounce. Tyagi. Parityagi is just emphasis. That means complete renunciation. Even people who don't know Sanskrit might be familiar with this word party. When they look at the pictures of the Buddha lying down and he's going into party nirvana, that means irrevocable, cannot be changed. So I think a couple of years ago I talked on this chapter and I mentioned this, but I'll mention it again. I had this thought. Imagine Buddha when he was 20 years old, he attained nirvana. It was like jumping off the bridge. But remember, I said that even avatars had egos. So even Buddha, after he had the nirvana experience, he still had the ripe ego of the avatar. And so he was like, he had a bungee cord when he jumped off that bridge, and he, boing, came back up onto the bridge. And he had to live 60 more years and preach the Dharma. And then he had what's called party nirvana. And this time when he jumped off the bridge, there was no bungee cord. Well, so that gives you the sense of party. Party means party tyagi. It's not only giving up, but totally, finally, forever, never to be rescinded. And this is what he's saying. Shubha, shubha, good and bad is to be forever given up. Well, just as it bothered me a lot that Arjuna had to be associated with despondency, it bothered me, this giving up good and bad. And I know that Swami Vivekananda said, to do good and to be good is the whole of religion. Yet this verse of Sri Krishna is saying to throw away good and bad forever. I'm not going to pretend I know the answer to this, but the other thing I thought about was the Devi. When in the fall, when we worship all the different forms of the goddess, we hear this hymn from the Chandi, where we say the goddess is referred to as Sarva Mangala Mangalye. And Mangala means good. It means auspicious and good. And she is the essence, the embodiment of everything that is good. Shive Sarvartha Sadhike. Well, I hate to do this, but if I stick to the imagery that I had with the Buddha, then I'm forced to say that that the person who is going to give up good and bad has to push his mother, the goddess, the good one, off the bridge. Now, actually, there was one person, if you can imagine, who might have thought about pushing his mother off the bridge. If I was there with you, I could ask, maybe somebody would know the answer to that, but I'll just tell you, the person is Arjuna. If we look back at Arjuna, he went to a Swayamvara, and he won in that contest. He won Draupadi, the most beautiful woman in the world. And he came back to his mother and he said, "Oh, mother, I was at the contest and I won the grand prize." And his mother said, "That's really nice, my son. Be sure to share your prize with your brothers," which is something that he had to do. And we're all familiar with that famous prayer of the Pandavas made. Mother Kunti, she prayed to Sri Krishna that her family would always be in trouble, which she called vipad. Sampad is something good, vipad is difficulty. And she said, Vipada santu na shashwat, may we always have trouble. Tatra tatra, wherever we go. This sounds a little bit like the pandemic. Bhavato, and why did she wish for that trouble? She said, Bhavato darshana yatsyat, because we will have the vision of you. And when we have your vision, we're actually having what is called apunar bhava darshana. We're having the vision of what it is like to not have to be born again. Okay, back to the bridge. Luckily, mother comes back just like the Buddha came back. Now we have one other thing that is good. And one of the prayers to the Divine Mother in the Chandi, it says, "O Mother, whenever you are remembered, Durge Smrita, whoever remembers you when they are in trouble, Harasi Biti Mashe Shajanto, you wipe away all the troubles of all of those beings." Then, suppose now there's a time when we're not in a pandemic, when everything is going well, and that's called swasti. Swastyoi smrita. If those fortunate people can remember you when everything is going well, then you give them your greatest blessing and your greatest good. And what is that? It's called matim. Matim means a thought, but in the Gita and the Vedas, it always means wisdom. What kind of wisdom does she give? Otiva means extreme. Shubham matim. She gives the good thought, the pure thought. And remember, this is what we're seeing here in line C of 17 is Shubha Parityagi. We're supposed to give up the good and the bad. That would mean we're not only giving up the mother, but we're giving up her greatest gift, which was the Shubham matim, the pure thought. Yomad Bhakta Same Priyaha. That verse ends like that. That person in Bhakta is dear to me. So I toss that out for anyone who wants to think about giving up good and evil. But maybe we find the answer in the next verse, and that is Samakshatro Chamitre Cha, verse 18. Be the same with your enemy and your friend. And perhaps this was just specific advice for Arjuna because the battle is imminent. He's right there. And Sri Krishna says, be the same to your friend and your enemy. So I'm going to take it like that this was just particular instruction to Arjuna and not to us. Samakshatro chamitre cha tata manapamanayo, and also be the same in honor and dishonor. Shitoshna sukha dukeshu, in cold and in heat, and in suffering and in joy. There's the word dukkha again. And 19th verse is Tulya Ninda Stutir Moni. Moni, be silent and be the same in praise and blame. Santushta Yena Kena Chita. Be the same no matter what comes to you. Santushto Yena Kena Chit. Aniketa Stiramati. Aniketa means you have no fixed abode. Aniketa is like a flag or an address sign. Bhaktiman me priyo naraha. And now we are finally at the last verse. And final verse is Yetu dharmyamritam idam yatoktam paryupasate shraddadana matparama bhaktaste tiva me priya. Those bhaktas are extremely dear to me who practice this righteous form of religion that I have taught and who are filled with faith. They are very dear to me. So there we are. We've come to the end of the 12th chapter, Bhakti Yoga. This is the chapter where the Lord comes to us. And in the last chapter, we saw how we went towards him. And I would like to close. Gita is the song of Krishna. We can close with the song of the gopis, Gopi Gita. And they talk about the Lord's words, and they call them the Katamritam, the words of the nectar-like words of immortality. And the last verse in Bhakti Yoga, we talked about Dharmyamritam. So there is a direct connection there. And so the gopis said, Tavakatamritam tapta jivanam kovidiritam kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadattatam Uvigrinanti Te Buridhajana. O Lord, your words are like nectar to soothe tormented souls. Your words are repeated by poets and they wipe away all of our sins. Your words are Shravanamangalam, auspicious to hear, and they bestow prosperity wherever they are heard. Whoever relates your words, they have given the greatest gift. Thank you all very much. Shankar, I turn it over
Thank
to
you. Thank you. Thank you, Dhruva, for this wonderful exposition of the Gita, chapter 12. As always now, this is the time where we practice the art of spirituality together. Any of you who have questions, comments, anything that you'd like to ask Dhruva about what he said, or any comments that you'd like to make about your own feelings or what this has given rise to you, given rise to in you, please share that with us. This is studying the art of spirituality together. Please be forthcoming.
Comment and question. Interesting comment on what you'd said at the opening, Brother Shankara, about the president ordering the reopening of all churches, but you're going to listen to the experts. A friend of mine on Facebook recently said, if you were stranded on Gilligan's Island, who would you listen to, the millionaire or the professor? I thought that was kind of the same thing. But anyway, the question is, you said a bhakta should not begrudge people. Is that from chapter 12?
Yes, it is. It was harsha, amarsha, mukta, free from that. Harsha means you get overly excited. Amarsha means, oh, I can't bear you just won $1 million in the lottery. But that's just envy, because if I won it too, then I wouldn't care at all. So envy was not a good translation for amarsha. Means you cannot bear. You cannot bear that someone else has something good. And so there, I thought finally after a month or two, someone told me that the word for that is to begrudge.
It's kind of like jealousy then, isn't it?
Yeah, except that if I had what you have, I wouldn't be jealous of you anymore. That's based on certain condition. They're similar. They're similar. Yes,
and Patanjali makes the exact same point in the Yoga Sutra, that we are to share the joy of those who have success and share the sorrow of those who are in sorrow, and not begrudge people's success or feel like, oh, that's just their karma if they're in sorrow. Thank you, Dhruva. Anyone else?
Uma, you're muted. I think you're trying to talk.
Uma, if you're there, you are, dear.
Yes, sure. Thank you. Brother Dhruva. Okay. I wanted to make two comments. One about why the chapter is titled Vishad Yoga. As you explained, could Vishad, that is despondency, can it really be called a yoga? I'm thinking that the idea is probably to emphasize the state of mind in which Arjuna was at that point. So although it's not a yoga, it's a very natural leading to this story, that why this whole thing happened. Because Arjuna was down in the dumps. And that makes perfect sense psychologically. If you call Manas Shastra, science of psychology. So to me, it gives a platform to start the story. That's how I look at Vishad Yoga. That's my one comment. So it belongs. Second comment is about Shubha. Why Krishna is asking to give up Shubha or Mangala, good. The way I interpret that is that Krishna is asking for us to go beyond Gunatita, neither good nor bad, but rise above even Sattva. Sattva is next to godliness. But even Ramakrishna said, and Vivekananda said, all these saints said, that the ideal is not just to be good, but to go beyond the pairs of opposites, good and bad. So it is called Gunatita. That's my comment. And last one is my question, please. Why does Krishna ask to renounce all kinds of undertakings? If I think what is not said here is the implication that renounce those kind of undertakings which are self-oriented. No selfless act is forbidden. So what it means by renouncing those kind of actions which are undertaken for selfish purpose. So again, rise above such selfish acts, or don't act for the fruits of action. These are my thoughts that I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Dhruva? Any response to what Uma said?
I understand the concept of gunatita, but for ordinary bhakta, it's easy to end up with hypocrisy, because as I pointed out, we don't have same-sidedness and we don't have compassion. All those things that are clearly obvious, and yet, so we can't really say we're gunatita. It's just a few thoughts.
Thank you, Dhruva.
Yeah, I recognize that Arjuna was despondent,
Yeah.
but you could say the Buddha was despondent too. But all the true seekers like that, the great souls, they had to look misery in the face and overcome it. But I think the yoga for the first chapter should literally be the examination of the problem of suffering. And that Krishna himself said that, in fact, is knowledge. Look at chapter 13, verse 8. Krishna himself said that is knowledge. So, you can take a bad thing and turn it into a good thing, which is what Arjuna did. Otherwise, I think I can understand, but I can't get past the good and bad, giving up the good and bad.
Can you hear me, Brother Shankar?
Yes, yes, Bhagavad.
You see, Sanskrit is such a mysterious language that sometimes it has to be perceived rather than grammatically followed. To that extent, every word that has been translated could be in other ways also. And therefore, I would particularly stay on Shubha-Shubham because it has been brought into the limelight. That Shubha and Ashubha is not good and bad, but auspicious and not auspicious. And my comment here is that we should not follow Shubha-Shubham because sometimes we do not even know what is good for us and what is bad for us. So that's why we relinquish everything to God. I will give you one crude example. That there are several examples of the couples that have won lottery, $1 million, $2 million. And if you follow that, within 7 days, they have either gone into self-destructive suicide or divorce or anguish or going insane. So that case, was winning the lottery a good thing or a bad thing? Auspicious or a bad thing? So my whole idea is that once you understand the nature of God, you stop distinguishing between Shubha and Ashubha. And like we say, whatever God does is usually for our good. Sometimes we understand that, sometimes we do not understand that, and therefore we should go from that particular point on.
Thank you, Bhagavad. Dhruva?
I agree.
I have a question.
Wait, just a moment. Let's just see if Dhruva has a response to what Bhagavad said.
I agree. Thinking of auspicious and punya instead of good, and not be attached to the results of your own good works, that's highly recommended. So yes, I see that a different slight interpretation, emphasis, instead of saying just mere good and bad. I agree with the doctor.
And of course, Krishna is presenting the ideal, always the ideal, and it's reflected in Sri Ramakrishna's prayer. Take that which is good and that which is not good, and give me pure love for thee. This is his prayer. That which is auspicious, that which is unauspicious, and give me pure love for thee. This is the bhakta's desire, to be in a state of pure love for the divine. It's the ideal. Of course, it's a long road there. Mr. Ayers.
Okay, Bill, you said that that you cannot rid yourself of the ego. Not even the gods can do this. But being that the ego is not a physical thing, so you're not talking about removing something that's physical, it's a concept. Are you saying that you cannot expect or be able to control the ego? Anyone?
Dhruva?
Well, if we can't even control our minds, how can we control the ego, which is even more subtle, which is the source of where things arise?
I think this is why Sri Ramakrishna said, you don't rid yourself of the ego. The ego becomes mature or ripe. You start with an unripe ego, which is a self-centered, self-seeking, grasping ego. And you end up with an other-centered, open-handed, compassionate ego. This is the ripe ego. One that is not constantly seeking after things of the lower self.
So you're saying the ego becomes something else? Because
it doesn't become something else.
Definition of the ego.
It doesn't become something else any more than a fruit becomes something else when it becomes ripe, Robert. What happens is Sri Ramakrishna also compares the ego to a ripe to a potato. He said a potato dug out of the ground is hard and unyielding, and for that matter even unnourishing. Once it's boiled, it's soft and nourishing, and so it's not that it becomes something else. It simply changes its nature, its expression. We need to remember that there is only one ego. Everything else, even in the highest gods, is reflectance. is reflectance. It is a reflected being. So the more perfect our reflection is, the cleaner our heart is, as they say, then the more likely we are to be reflecting the ego that is manifested by the divine person, rather by the Ishvara, because there is no ego in Brahman. Ego is something that arises as a way of saying, oh, I am the one distinguishing this from that. But it is the third step down from the great cause. The great cause occurs, the manifestation, duality. Then this capacity of being able to tell one thing from another, yes from no, black from white, light from darkness. This is the buddhi. This is the second iteration. This is the second step. But then in the great cosmic mind, who is distinguishing? Oh, I am distinguishing. But if you look, now, this is only the third of the 24 cosmic principles. There is a lot of manifestation yet to be accomplished before we are reflecting this buddhi, with this great cause, this buddhi, and this divine persona, ahamkara, the eye maker. And so we are reflecting that. The more perfect our reflection is, the more, this is what Sri Ramakrishna refers to as the ripe ego. And he says, in the ripe ego, you become like an expert dancer. You cannot put a foot wrong. And as a musician, you will understand this very profoundly. It's because you are no longer moving to the music. The music is moving you. That which is happening simply moves you. You are not, there isn't even any time to think about it, let alone to make it selfish. So this is the difference between the ripe and the unripe ego. Is that clear, Robert?
So we're not talking about getting rid of the ego. We're talking about changing the nature of the ego.
Yes.
Well, as a fruit ripens, and you could say its nature changes, yes.
And once we change the nature of ego, it is now no longer ego. So we have to call it something else. Because
No. It is still, ego is simply a translation of the term ahamkara, I maker.
Now is.
Say it again, please.
I said, once we change the nature of the ego, then we can't, no longer, when we speak about the ego, we're speaking of it as it was, not as it is now. So the name has to change, or we keep going, or we'll keep throwing our mind.
If you want to use a different word, then for your own purposes, that makes perfect sense. The word in Sanskrit is ahamkara, the eye maker.
Say that again.
Aham kara. Aham is I, I-ness, kara, maker. Aham kara. That's the word we translate as ego. We have this sense of I because within our mind stuff, within the 5 sheaths that make up this action and experience suit, there is reflectance of the divine person, reflectance of the divine energy. It's what powers it. It's what gives it a sense of being. When we think of ourselves as separate from that being, this is when we have the unripe ego. as we move more and more closely to a complete identification of our being with the being, this is the ripe ego. This is the ripe I maker. This is the I maker that really exists, rather than our imperfect reflectance of it when our ego, when our sense of I making is unripe.
So you're saying that after you change that nature of the ego, it becomes ahamkara.
No.
It is always ahamkara.
So then
Imperfectly.
another name doesn't solve the problem. It's once you call it ego, then in our minds, we go back to the definition that we originally had of ego.
Well,
we don't now have
if that's the way
nature
well,
change.
if that's the way your mind works, then by all means adopt a different name. Adopt, instead of in terms of no longer call it the ego, call it the expert musician.
May I intervene?
Of course, that's what this is all about.
Robert, the way I look at it, see, what do we call our child? When a child grows up, we know that now that child is adult, but still it is our child. So if at all, I think it compares with ego. Right ego is like our own child, which is now grown up, which is mature. But in its child version, it was just wayward, it was unruly, it was out of control. But still, when somebody says, who is this? Oh, that's my child.
Very nice metaphor.
So the child has become adult, but it's still your child. Ahamkara. What makes you and I know that I am Uma is my sense of identity. I. So identity maker. That's ego. But later on, hopefully, you go past that. Oh, mine. This is mine. When you grow up, you become more mature and say you first, I later. But still it's the ripe ego. If it makes sense.
That's a very nice metaphor. Made perfect sense.
Thank you.
So Robert, you just have to work out the language of this for yourself. But the idea is that which exists does not change. Our expression of it changes.
Yes.
Yeah. But even with the example that she just gave, you see, it was a child, the name child. Then when that person grew up, they were no longer a child, they're now an adult. So they have another name, adult. I'm saying that ego is the same way as that.
If that's the way it works for your mind, Robert, if that's the way it works for your mind, then by all means adopt that strategy.
I think we have killed it.
It doesn't need to be true for everyone.
I understand the concept, but I'm just trying to see a way to make it really clear, so anybody and everybody can understand it and be able to actually do it. You see, because if people don't understand,
I think we should move on.
You read what Sri Ramakrishna says in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It becomes very clear, Robert. It becomes very clear. This difference between being an inexpert musician, and uses that metaphor also, an inexpert musician or an unripe ego, and an expert musician and a ripe ego. It becomes very clear. And
maybe it becomes clear to you. It doesn't become clear to me because, you see, ego is something from the very beginning, it's something unseen. It's something that we experience, and we act it out with.
Well, I think it's better if we not argue this, Robert. I really think that it's best that you simply find the best strategy for yourself to and I think that it's very good that we're having this discussion, but let's not have it be adversarial, because that's not my intent at all. I simply say there is a way for you to make this work for yourself. And if you ask yourself, ask your divine nature for that expression, you will find it. Anyone else? Is there a hand raised that I'm not seeing? So speak up.
Okay, this is why I'm sorry I was not unmuted.
Yes, okay.
I'm not sure if I heard or understood correctly, but in the beginning, Brother Dhruva, I think I heard something to the effect that the only suffering that can be overcome is the future suffering. Can you explain that a bit? Because I thought that we are always advised not to live in the past or future, but in the present. Most likely, I didn't understand that.
I will, these are just the 4 sutras in Patanjali's system of yoga that he had. So I gathered them together. Some of them you can't do anything about, like everything that comes under the control of others is suffering, dukkha. We recognize that in many ways. Maybe we can overcome it by changing the circumstances, but as long as we are under the influence of others, that's not freedom, that's dukkha. And this one here, heyam dukkham, heyam means you can throw it out. Anagatam. Gatam is gone, agatam has come, and anagatam is what is not yet come. Your past suffering still exists as a thought, as a memory. And the present, you're enmeshed in it right now, but it's only the future that you can actually avoid. Any kind of suffering that can positively be avoided, it will be in some future event that can be avoided. That is why Holy Mother, she said, if we pray to the Lord, then where we were going to get a sword blow, we just get a pinprick instead. You're familiar with her, that saying of hers, that those that are devoted to the Lord,
yes,
they cannot avoid their past karma, but instead of a huge sword blow, they'll just get a tiny prick, because that was coming at you, and then you got protected by something, either your own efforts or the divine mercy. I don't really know how to.
We change the future by what we do in this moment. We change the future by what we do in this moment.
That's the new normal.
You can look into Swami Vivekananda in his book Jnana Yoga. He speaks very explicitly about how the cause and effect works. And the effects that we're experiencing now are the result of causes in the past. The effects in the future will be the result of our actions now, the causes that we create now. We change the cause now, we change the effect in the future, which is what Dhruva was just pointing to in the teachings of Holy Mother.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dhruva. That was good. All right, anything else from anyone? Well, this has been a wonderful meeting. Dhruva, thank you for this excellent exposition of the 12th chapter.
Thank you.
And of course, all of you know that if there was something you missed, it's been recorded. You'll be able to find it in a couple of days on the website and on the YouTube channel, the center's YouTube channel, so that you can listen to all of this again if you wish. So without objection, I will close with our chant and end the meeting. Let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let this infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all suffering and joyous beings everywhere. Om Hari Om Tat Sat. And Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. Thank you for coming. And to all a good afternoon.
Yes.
And those of you who wish and are participating, tomorrow we'll have our reading of Vivekananda's portions, 20-page sections of Vivekananda's complete works. If you still haven't sent me an email requesting your participation in that, there's still time. I will send you a copy of Vivekananda's complete works and a reading assignment for tomorrow, Memorial Day. The world will be greatly benefited by the fact that all of Swamiji's complete works will be read. All 9 volumes will be read tomorrow. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Bye-bye, everyone.